that we can do volunteer recognition and take it to the next level. And we'll hear about how we can support volunteers better at this time. And then, of course, a little bit on training and how we did in a session yesterday that Shimon is going to share us with the insights from the community responder volunteer orientation, and what does that tell us about how we might improve our training at this time. So I'm going to delve right into. Oh, sorry, I didn't know that there was sound on the slide. Okay, I'm going to have to. Yeah. So okay, there we go. All right. So the different ways of recognizing volunteers. So there are a number of ways in which we kind of think of recognition, right? And so, what do we mean by volunteer recognition? So broadly speaking, we can kind of divide them into some clusters. So these clusters are, awards, where we are actually giving something like a certificate or a nomination to somebody, sometimes a gift even, a shout out, where we're giving a story or a snapshot or an announcement about what that person has done. There are perks. Sometimes it's a little harder to offer perks than others, and then during this COVID-19 time, I think it'll be tricky to find ways to offer perks to volunteers. But that could include flexibility on shifts or giving them a little more leeway in certain things. And then there are nods. These are the real subtle ways in which we acknowledge people, but it also includes references, which are really meaningful to volunteers. So these are some general ways in which we organize recognition. Now, at your organization, you're probably doing some of these things already, and during COVID-19, with some of your volunteers perhaps on the sideline and others in the front line, it changes how the dynamics look a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the valuable ways in which we can recognize. Sorry for the sound effects here. Okay, so I've borrowed a slide or two from a previous session here. So how to consider recognition. So essentially, what we've got is a number of ways of recognizing that are based on geography, location. Yeah, there we go. By geography, by community, by subject expertise in area, by magnitude of contribution, by your social location. So this is really important to consider for your volunteers. If a volunteer is going through a tough time or otherwise may have some other reasons why there might be even more of an effort that they put in. So, for example, if you have a newcomer who, for whom English is a second language, something that they may do, they're posting something on social media or they're, speaking on behalf of your organization. It might take, an additional effort for them to be able to do that, and that's something to consider when we're actually building our recognition pieces. And then, certainly there are communities and geography factors when we consider how we do our overall volunteer management and recognition across the board. Certainly, volunteers like to be recognized for their skills and their contributions, so subject matter and expertise is a major one too. These are just ways in which we consider recognition broadly. So I'd like to talk a little bit about National Volunteer Week and a few other things that are going on that can really be useful as far as enhancing your volunteer recognition. So first of all, it's National Volunteer Week. There are still 3 days left to celebrate National Volunteer Week if you haven't yet participated somehow. Volunteer Canada has their campaign kit. It's a fantastic tool that you can go through and look through all the social media icons and banners they've created. We sent it out earlier and we'll be happy to send it to you again, but it's available at volunteer.ca. Over there, you can engage and find certain templates to use for your promotion of Volunteer Week. As at the same time, they've really considered how can we, still continue to celebrate virtually. And this is important because I think there's a lot of activity going out there. We've been doing the 7 p.m. Clapping for volunteers and for frontline workers and healthcare professionals and essential workers. So, it's certainly something that you can participate in, but, the social media tools allow you to kind of draw some attention to that's happening. And we've been sharing, if you've been recording videos or engaging yourself as far as going out and promoting National Volunteer Week. We are eager to share your posts and materials on that. So the National Volunteer Week Campaign Kit is the first one you should look out for. There's also an amazing tool called the Language of Recognition tool that Volunteer Canada's created. It's basically a quiz to identify how each person likes to be recognized. So, there I mentioned from the top about the awards, the shout outs, the perks, and the nods. So each volunteer, whether they know it or not, has a type of language of recognition, something, a way in which they like to be appreciated. Some people don't want to be front and center. And it's happened before where we've got a nominee from the V Oscars who said, "Oh, this was a little too much, a little too much for me," although they're supposed to be informed by their organization. But the thing was that, understanding each volunteer's language of recognition is really important for appreciation. So Volunteer Canada's tool is essentially a little quiz that allows you to identify your language of recognition, and you can send this language recognition online tool to all your volunteers and ask them to tell you what their language of recognition is, and you can give better personalized recognition on that front. Now, one of the major initiatives that came out of the 2015 Pan Am Games was the Achieve Ontario Recognition Certificate, which identifies skilled volunteers. And this time, with our community really coming together, we're looking for people with enhanced skills to contribute and certainly identify what they can do to help address the emergency crisis. So people who have additional skills in healthcare backgrounds or are comfortable and have skills in terms of taking care of seniors or other vulnerable populations, those skills are in high demand, as well as skills to serve on boards as treasurers, a background with finance background. So understanding skilled volunteerism and appreciating it is extremely important right now. So with Achieve Ontario, one of the key things that came out of the Pan Am Games was a tool which allows you to create a recognition certificate that identifies, using national occupation codes, their individual skills and the tasks that they completed, as well as that number of hours, and to create a really good standardized certificate. So what Volunteer in BC does is we train organizations on how to use the Achieve Ontario system to produce a certificate. Because right now, if you're using a certificate and you have your own certificate, it's great that you're doing that, but it's also quite likely that gets put into a drawer because other people aren't able to understand, what is the value of that certificate. The volunteer may know to some degree, and your organization may know, but outside of that, it doesn't have, the currency. Whereas with the Achieve Ontario certificate, because it's using the national occupation codes modified into a sort of volunteerism glossary, we've been able to issue these certificates to people. And during the Pan Am Games, that went out to about 25,000 volunteers. But we'd love to see more organizations come on and get training on how to issue Achieve certificates, or work with us, and we can help you get Achieve certificates issued to volunteers who have contributed, either significant number of hours, or they have also demonstrated, especially some unique skill sets that are really stand out. So achieveontario.ca is where you can go, but you can get a general idea of Achieve from there, or you can talk to us about how to get the training on Achieve. Now, there's a few new things that we're hoping to be able to do during COVID-19 as far as recognizing volunteers. One of those things is through our social media channels, we'd love to do virtual interviews with volunteers, whether that's through a recorded video or a live broadcast, but to talk to volunteers. So if you know of volunteers who just, they love to talk about their organization and what they do, and they care, and they're, comfortable in front of an audience, we can do a virtual interview with them. And we'd love to be able to put that on our channels and talk to people as much as they'd like to talk to us, and certainly capture what they've been doing and what it means to them to volunteer. And really, that it's not just for the purpose of recognizing them, which it accomplishes, but also it's a great way to inspire other people to volunteer. And certainly, if you've been following along There's, during this time, John Krasinski, an actor from the show The Office, he's running a online program called Some Good News, where they're sharing different good news stories each day. So, it's really important for us, we believe, to tell the good news that's happening in our community. People are, uncertain, they're concerned, they're afraid. It's really important that we put some good news out there. So that's one of the things that we would love to be able to do. We're also very interested in doing more snapshots. So some volunteers might not be comfortable going for full scale of an interview, but understanding your highlights for a volunteer and just giving them a good snapshot is one shout out method of being able to recognize those volunteers on social media. So if you're doing that already, absolutely tag us and we would be happy to share it. If you're not already doing it, but you'd like us to be able to do it on your behalf, let us know and we can amplify the voice of, and views of those volunteers being appreciated on social media. In fact, social media recognition is, a really good way, in many ways of being able to get the word out there, especially now. But just in general, it allows you to keep a record of those stories, and if you do it systematically, you're able to really measure your volunteer management impact as well in the long run, because you'll be able to pull all of those snapshots after some time and say, oh yeah, you know what, we did 20 snapshots about some amazing contributions of volunteers. And that's something that you could look at over the course of several months. So those are a few ways. Outside of that, we do broad communications to our volunteer list. So we send out, right now we've been sending out daily thank yous to our own volunteers, at Volunteer in BC, as a way of saying, thanks for your contributions. And so we've been doing that from each of our staff, a personal message. So you might be doing things like that. But we also send out, congratulations and greetings and thank yous to other volunteers outside of our organization. But to do that, they need to be connected to our mailing lists and so forth. So if you have volunteers that aren't already connected to Volunteer in BC, you should by all means let them know about us, have them sign up and create a volunteer profile with us so that they can start receiving those kind of communications. Then they would have received, all of our National Volunteer Week messaging and other messaging throughout the year that appreciates, volunteers and says thank you to volunteers. So it's a great way to put less work on you and allow us to thank volunteers and make sure everybody's feeling that appreciation. So that's what I wanted to say about recognition. I want to throw it to the floor to get some input on, a few things. One is, what else can we do to recognize volunteers? Things like, what awards, nods, perks, and shoutouts are you using? I should say not shoutouts, it's my goalie side talking, shoutouts that are you using at your organization? And how can we make a bigger impact or show of appreciation? When I think about going out at 7 p.m. and clapping for volunteers, it's appreciated, and it's great when I see my neighbors are out at the same time and we're doing it together. And then it's great when we put that on social media. But what if our organizations work together? What could we do to amplify it and really make it something visible? So these are some questions I'd like to throw out, and I'd like to hear from any organizations that wish to share about how they're recognizing their volunteers now.
Hi, it's Derek from the city. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Derek.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for this, Sean. We do a few things. We're pretty large, so we do a few things, maybe not as much as everyone else, but to recognize the volunteers. Currently this year, we had some things in line. I know certainly you guys were going to light the clock tower for us orange, and that got canceled, unfortunately, due to the COVID-19. We recognize our volunteers on our reader boards and in TV spots that show up in our facilities on our TV screens. Again, all of that got canceled this year due to COVID-19, but I was able to recognize the volunteers on our volunteer system through a message that went out to the volunteers. It has the theme from Volunteer Canada, like you were suggesting, in there already, and so I sort of adjust my wording to fit that. So any volunteer that opens that will see the recognition. we have volunteer administrators in different lines of business and units, and some of them send out, like where I wouldn't send out the actual recognition email to those volunteers, the administrators for their accounts would send out individual recognitions. And I know some of our staff have done that and asked their media people to put things out. We've sent something out in the media, and I'm not too good with Twitter and things of that nature and Facebook, but some messaging has gone out from our mayor and from other people in the city who are sending that out. So that information is out, which is great. And the other thing I'd like to mention that we're doing that's in line with what you were saying earlier, and it's new for us. And again, it got canceled initially, but it's slightly different. I guess it would be like a snapshot or a interview, as you were saying on the other slide. We had plans to do interviews of our staff who used to be volunteers, because we were trying to get out the fact that sometimes the volunteering also leads into future positions. So we had chosen a few staff from different genders and backgrounds, and we were going to do some filming on them, giving their story on how they started with the city, for example, volunteering, and how they've, how it's gone on to become a career for them. So that's actually going to go out after, this COVID-19 settles down. So it will be something that we can continue on with that. That's it for now, I guess.
Thanks, Derek. So you mentioned a few things there that are very interesting. Certainly, the mayor and when public officials come forward and give a thank you, that's so much appreciated. I think volunteers like to see that from their community leaders, but also that it's something that gets a lot of visibility too. And as far as the clock tower not being able to light it this year, that's one thing that speaks to that third question, which is how can we make that show of appreciation when some of our physical landmarks or actions might not be as easy to do. What could we supplement it with? What could we do differently? So I think the ways in which the messaging we're putting out onto the websites and onto social media is a good start. And if we work together, I think organizations we could probably come up with some ways to still accomplish those kind of visual thank yous, but we'd have to just come up with a way to do it virtually. So anyone else want to share about what they're doing or what they had intended to do? Or
And Sean, sorry, just let me interrupt, and I'm sorry, this really doesn't have much to do with the recognition item, but I just wanted to let you guys know, because I know Kareen's here, you're here, and I think Shaminder might be here as well, but just wanted to let you guys know at Volunteer NBC and everybody else that our links to your COVID-19 page just went live. I just got the email now, so on our web pages, it now links to Volunteer NBC for everybody's positions that go through you for the COVID-19. So it's now live and up and running. So I just wanted to give you that update. Sorry.
No, that's great. We're happy to hear that, Derek. Thank you.
I'd like to share if it's possible. This is Lion Julian from A711, the Lions Clubs. First and foremost, I want to say thanks for this discussion and the invite to come to it. This is Volunteers Week, so it's good to recognize this at this time. Now, in our group as Lions, we do service. That's our main goal. And recognition is at different levels. The first level will be in the individual clubs, because that is immediate. Then the information goes to the district, and the district eventually forwards it to international. So basically, our people are being honored almost throughout the year in different forms, because a volunteer that is happy and recognized will be a volunteer that will volunteer. I always believe in that motto. It's not necessarily a monetary contribution, but just the simple thing as saying thank you. And thank you can come in several forms: a pat in the back, a certificate, a voucher, or something just to say thank you for the stuff that you've been doing. And I do look forward to always coming and visiting VMBC, because I think you're doing wonderful stuff. I am on the other side of the city, but Lions clubs are in your area. So basically, my connection is like that. So thank you very much for honoring and give me this opportunity to listen and share. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lion Julian. So actually, I think organizations can learn a lot from organizations like the Lions Club, because one of the things that Lions clubs and even the Rotary clubs, even the Scouts organizations do well is they have a real sense of team among their clubs. And so what happens is there's sort of a staged approach. There are milestones where when someone hits a certain milestone, it's appreciated. There's even things like the visuals of sometimes a shared vest that they might wear, things like that. So I think these are things that, although individual organizations might say, "Oh, we're too small maybe to do this," or we don't know if we have the structure to do this, but perhaps if we were to cross collaborate, we might say, "Oh, we could come up with some common benchmarks for badges, or set some kind of a general standard. Maybe that's a way that we could do that." Or even in karate, there's different colored belts and stuff like that. So there's ways in which we could perhaps think about systemizing some of those personal thank yous into a way that becomes even more appreciated and more visual, and things that people can have it set as a goal for them to really keep going and motivating. So thank you, Lion Julian. And anyone else want to add?
Sean, this is Marina. We have quite a few ideas that are being populated in the chat. Do you want to go through those now, or are we going to share them?
If you could read, if they're recognition related, please share them. Because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see them right now.
Okay, I will start with the first one, and that was from Nadisha at United Way. Nadisha, are you able to speak?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome.
Hey,
hey, everyone. Happy National Volunteer Week. Maybe I'll just speak to a little bit about what we've been doing at United Way, because there's a lot of communication going out to a lot of our stakeholders. We have really streamlined a lot of the messaging going out, which includes kind of our annual email out on National Volunteer Week to volunteers. So it was incorporated as part of a bulletin to all stakeholders with a video from our CEO. And as the two ideas I listed, one is writing LinkedIn recommendations to volunteers. Again, it comes to that relationships volunteer managers have with their volunteers and knowing who might really value that kind of a recognition. To Sean's earlier point of, the volunteer languages, everyone have their own way of really feeling valued. That's a tool, and we are provided with some templates that volunteer managers can use. So that has been valuable. And another one is the Ontario Volunteer Service Awards. I know someone mentioned about, it's throughout the year, volunteer recognition. So we have been using that as a tool. But I did want to say to your question about what else can we do, how can we systematize this? Something we've noticed is for events, some of our heavy lifting volunteers were not showing up to our events. It could be because they already felt thanked, they've gotten some form of email or recognition. So we started doing things a little bit differently with events, incorporating a learning or kind of a training element. So the first time we did it, we kind of surveyed our volunteers, found out there was a greater interest in Indigenous cultural competency training. So we partnered with one of the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers and hosted a session. And we actually found out, looking at who showed up, some of our governance volunteers, some of our really very committed, dedicated volunteers showed up. So that we did it for 2 years. And maybe that's something we can think of. What kind of training? I mean, you guys do a lot of training online. So maybe there's a way to explore that. Because we always talk in job descriptions, benefits to volunteers. But sometimes volunteers do a lot of work. We thank them, but that could be an added benefit of whether it is learning something about the sector or having access to that kind of a training. We heard like Indigenous culture companies, and a lot of people didn't have access to that training. So that's something I wanted to share here today.
Thanks, Nadisha. Yeah, definitely including volunteers in situations where they may not have otherwise been included is a great way to recognize more. And we need to, if we have opportunities for that, if maybe organizations say, we have an experience, even if it's a virtual experience that somebody could participate in, then you might think, well, my volunteers have already done that all the time. But maybe another organization hasn't had that chance to have their volunteers do that. So we could definitely have some cross-pollination of that kind of inclusion. We have someone else on the line or additional comments, Marina?
Yeah, so there's Chandra, and I believe Chandra can speak to that as well. Thank you, Chandra.
I just didn't want to compete for the microphone here. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're gonna have to shout a little bit, but yep.
Okay. Let me shout. First of all, shout out to all our volunteers. So we have always had, so our long-term care homes, we've had, still old school. They appreciate banquets, recognition banquets, whereas in our public health programs, we've always done continuous recognition throughout the year, as and when they finish their assignment. What we would do is send them a token of appreciation, send them a certificate, a nice letter of thanks, etc. So that the ongoing recognition, thankfully, is still possible. But what we do for National Volunteer Week, obviously, we had to kind of suspend. But what we did was we sent some personal messages to all our volunteers, and what we got in return was what was so nice. They all speak about how much they miss the interaction and what a big part their volunteering has been, as part of their life. So that was really nice. And it also showed that the need for this constant engagement and touch base that I think the volunteers really value. That's all I had.
Yeah, good point, especially about the impact on the volunteer and that personal connection, that regular check-in. We need to be able to do that. And it's really difficult, I think, for the large organizations with lots of volunteers to find ways to do that. But that's also something that where we could play a role and work together to make sure those volunteers are seen and heard and acknowledged. So thank you, Chandra. Additional comments, Marina? Who else we got?
Yes, and then I have Christina. Christina's from the Living Arts Center.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Christina.
Okay. Yeah, I think for us, we do recognition throughout. Usually for volunteer week, we usually have something every day and a big potluck dinner. And in October, we had our volunteer recognition dinner planned, and we usually nominate a few for volunteers for the Voskers. But this week we tried to do as much virtually, sending something every day just to make them feel appreciated. One of our supervisors wrote a poem for them that, related to the current situation and how much we miss them. We put together a video with our CEO. Some of our staff sent in messages and we put it all together. And we got a lot of positive feedback. We had some volunteers said that it brought them to tears, just being remembered. And we've been using the volunteer.ca website a lot with that campaign and a lot of social media. At the end of this week, we were supposed to have a potluck, but since we can't, we're going to do like a recipe exchange, but we'll see how that will work out. But, we just try to keep connected as much. We also sent them a few of the links from the city of Mississauga about staying active at home, some of the library links, like virtual library, just for them to be engaged, since a lot of our roles the volunteer roles they can't do virtually. A lot of them is face-to-face in person. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's fantastic, Christina. And you spoke, about the poem. I think that those personal touches, the artistic elements that you're bringing in are really valuable. And I think other organizations might be wise to see if they have the capacity to do things like that, and if not, maybe teaming up or reaching out to the Living Arts Center to access a skilled volunteer who could play a song for them, or do something nice. Then it's an additional volunteer role, but it's also a way to say thanks to our volunteers. So maybe that's something to explore as well. We can take a couple more comments, and then we would move on into some of the other topics we were going to cover today. And if you're not speaking, you can just mute your mic.
Yes. Hi,
Anyone
folks.
else?
It's Carmela from the Active Adult Center.
Hi, Carmela.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'll be short and sweet. At our organization, well, first and foremost, congratulations to our volunteer administrators and leaders for your exceptional work, to you all. At our center, we actually compiled some items on our website. We took a photo shoot from all the staff. We downloaded some information on Facebook. I did a videotape congratulating all our volunteers. We did a robocall to all our volunteers acknowledging that it is National Volunteer Week. And we're also providing a volunteer chat room forum for our various volunteer teams. And that's it.
Wow, that's it. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's it. We've been kind of busy.
Yeah, but I think those virtual efforts, if organizations can replicate or even scale them to some degree. If we wanted to thank all the volunteers in Mississauga or all the volunteers in Peel Region, how might we do that? So I'm thinking to myself, well, those same initiatives, if they're just done by the same by multiple organizations at the same time as a campaign of some kind, whether we do it toward National Volunteer Week or later on as this process continues, or maybe as some kind of an Earth Day thank you, or there's lots of opportunities, there's no shortage of opportunities, but the question is whether we work together and whether we can align ourselves, we could really scale that up. So that's really great to see, Carmela, that's happening at the Active Adult Center. And anyone else want to add anything? Okay, well, let us know if you'd like Volunteer NBC to help you with your volunteer recognition, and certainly access the tools that I've mentioned so far. We're going to get into a little discussion on some ways to support volunteers during this time. I'm going to hand it over to Robert, who's going to talk a little bit about our position templates that we've created here.
Thanks, Sean, and thank you in particular, Sean, for adding a particular web page to the Volunteer NBC website. That's just come on in the last 24 hours. And in the chat area, I have added the specific link to it so that participants here can conveniently access it to have a look. Things are starting to really move along. And one of the great things that I'm seeing right now is that our members are starting to review very closely their existing volunteer opportunities that are published on our website, and they're starting to adapt them to what I would generally term COVID-19 conditions. And just going through this at the moment short list, the telephone or virtual check-in, that by now that's an established given. That includes connections for seniors by seniors. And again, we've already on numerous occasions talked about the requirements of food banks, and in particular organizing, quite frankly, an emergency, plus in some cases setting up delivery to people who through self-isolation or for other reasons cannot go to the food bank to pick up necessary supplies. One other area that's come up is a possible initiative to help students who are still in school, but in school and obviously at home, and that's the Study Buddy template, which would invite educators, teachers, retired or otherwise, even students who are good in their studies, to virtually connect with students to help them with the special challenges that are occasioned by e-learning. The last one there, communication support. Yes, obviously, as we assimilate all the tools and software and things that that are provided to us with respect to virtual connections. We're going to need some support for that. We're not automatically knowledgeable, and we need people in the know to help us out, volunteers to help us out with that. And that's where that template comes in. To say it's a steep learning curve during this emergency, that's a delicate understatement. It's you just overnight, you practically have to be literate in it, and you need all the help you can get. So those are some of the templates that we've come up with. And the other gratifying thing that I'm seeing, and by the way, we are in the process by email, initially reaching out to every member who has an active position to directly focus and ask them about how they can make adjustments. The deal here, though, is that we are moving this along. I see very early, hugely encouraging signs that members are responding and they're starting to adapt, and it can only get better. And thank you, Sean.
Okay, thanks, Robert. I just want to add.
Sorry, Sean.
Yes.
Sean, are we able to bring up a template on the screen?
Sure. Which one do you want to see?
Anyone. It's a request just to see how the template looks like. Thank you.
Yeah, I will try to bring it up. 1 second. I need to alter my screen setting. So, all of the templates are available at volunteerbc.org on the versus COVID-19 page. There's a link to the position templates page, but I'll try to bring one up now. I'm facing some speed issues here, but let's see if this will work. Okay. So here's an example of technology. All right. I'm just about to share position template. Okay, so this is a position template just as a Word document that you can download right now. Actually, we're working on some interesting features here. So one of the things that we're working on our system is actually to make it so that there'll be a drop down when you're actually creating a template to a pre-populated template. But for now, we have these templates downloadable as Word documents. So, this is an example of a template. It's, the Robert and team has worked to put together the language that can go directly into one of our postings onto the referral teams about the qualifications required. And of course, you'll modify this to match your organization's needs. But there's 6 of them on there right now. And we'll continue to add more, but it's definitely something that will speed up your ability to recruit these kind of volunteers. If you're recruiting in a role that you might not have previously ever offered, then it's certainly something to consider. Is to talk to Volunteer BC, because you might think, well, I would love to have a delivery driver to help us, send food to one of our clients, but how do we do that? So we have organizations that might have more expertise in that department to be able to connect you with. So that's roughly what the position templates are there to do, is to kind of spur on the creation of these different types of roles that meet COVID-19's unique demands, but also to eventually get to a point where we are ready to keep working together. So I'm going to get into a little bit of training topics now with Shaminda, who is going to talk to us about our insights from the community responder volunteer orientation.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. So I just want to update you on the training that we had yesterday. The response is good. We had over 40 individual community responder volunteers. Some of them are connected to your organization, some of them are not. And but the number 40, I think, is a great number for us to start as our first session. There were more who came back saying that because of timing, they're unable to, but they want to be engaged in the training. So what we're doing is we recorded the session, and if you like to take a look at it, you can take a look at it as well. It's in our versus COVID-19 page. You can see what was the details that was discussed and the questions that they asked. But to give you as an update, what we mainly discussed was the rights and responsibilities of volunteers. That was the start. When we are talking about rights, I was explaining that how the organizations are doing their due diligence to make sure that the volunteers have a supportive and safe environment. And when it comes to responsibilities, that to make them understand they're taking on a role, even though it may be a virtual role, still the organization relies on the volunteers' engagement. Then I also mentioned that at this time, the organizations are resetting the way that they work. Some organizations do have virtual volunteering or remote working opportunities that they've been doing before, but some organizations don't, and it's a new reset of the entire operations. So I made a request for the volunteers to be patient and to support the processes, the procedures of the organization during this time. And at the same time, we shared a few health and safety tips. We did not go into great detail into explaining on how to wash hands, how to put on a mask, put on and remove the gloves. What we're going to do is we're going to have all of those various training and insights and tips that we find from YouTube and other sources on how to do the safety tips into the versus COVID-19 page. But we gave them 6 points for them to consider and to be mindful of. You could see those 6 points when you listen to the watch and listen to the recording. And at the same time, we also discussed on sometimes when the clients are starved for information, when the clients are maybe they are feeling isolated and they need contact and they need support for their day-to-day life skills, there could be requests that come from the clients which is out of the scope of the volunteers' engagement. And we discussed on how to handle those out of scope requests, mainly to say politely to say no, but instead of giving a complete hard no, to have based on the nature of the service that the volunteers are engaged with, to have a community resource list at hand, even if it means just one number to one organization or the number to whoever their program manager or volunteer lead is. But to have that at hand so that the clients know that the volunteer is here for that particular engagement or interaction, and for everything else that they have other supports in the community that they can reach out to. We did share about how to obtain a police records checks, and much of the questioning was also around the police records checks. We updated that the Ontario Provincial Police and the Peel Regional Police is conducting records checks based on a needs basis, and we emphasize that it's based on any position, any act that is directly in response to the COVID-19 situation, and the fact that they need to come in person but on appointment. But out of the questions, I posed a question to the forum today. We, as a general time frame, we said if you have a police records check that is done within the last 6 months, to inquire from you, the organization, whether that is valid. But there are those who have checks done beyond the 6 months period, like within the last 8 months or maybe even within the last 12 months. So if you could share into the chat box as to how you have sort of reset the requirement of the police records checks. I know you may have looked into the other screening procedures, which is good, but in terms of the issue period, the validity period, how far ahead have you sort of readjusted in accepting a police records checks? Is it within the last 6 months or within the last 12 months? Just let us know what it is so that we can give that information as a general information to the community responders. We did share other resources, the links to other resources, mainly to our versus COVID-19 page, and most of the guided discussions were based around what positions are in demand and whether they can select the positions that they want to be engaged in. There are quite a number of individuals who wanted to support with transportation related activities, and also there are individuals who are wanting to address an observed need in the community And the message we give and the advocacy that we make is, let us provide you with the right help and the right connections. So if you have an observed need, let us know, and we will connect you with one of our member organizations or the not-for-profit organizations, you folks who are online call today. So that is the update from the training yesterday. Now, I leave you with one question, apart from the police records checks. What would you have liked to see in that training? Now, you can see the major topics on the screen: rights and responsibilities, supporting organizations as they reset, health and safety tips, out of scope requests and boundaries, and police records checks. Is there anything else that you would have liked us to deliver to these volunteers? And with that, Sean, DJ Spider out and handing over to you.
Okay. There are some comments in the chat, Shaminda, specifically related to the length of time. Arvinder says some of the volunteers are doing volunteering more than 6 months, and do they need a police check for that? Chandra is saying that for the region of Peel, offense declaration should be, I think, if it's older than 6 months, then they can't accept those police checks due to policies and accreditation. And in Caledon, OPP aren't able to do the police checks right now. And then Derek adds that in Mississauga, they hadn't had to reset the positions yet, but for the positions that require it, they have a 1-month window for Parks and Rec. So that's some insight on that. So okay. Do others have comments about that, or what could be added to the training?
Sean, I would like to answer the question that Arvind had, because she asked, do we need police checks? Even if you ask the police, there is no hard and fast formula. What they tell us is, according to your risk management. So during this time, risk management is a very important practice and a very important reflection and a consideration in what we do. And based on that, if there's a need, like our advocacy is, make sure there is an absolute need for a police records checks. If there is one, then ask, and only at that time. But if you need, even the police will leave it to us, saying, to go back to our policies and see what our policies say. Now, see, even the RCMP and our local polices, they say that the police records checks is just one defense line out of others, and it is not the only defense line, right? So whatever you see on the police records checks that was obtained within the last 6 months, things may have changed within the last 1 month, right? But there are many other steps in screening that you can apply, the 10 steps of screening, see what is applicable, and only if there's a need for a police records check, an absolute need, then go for one.
Robert, here, can I just say one thing? Another consideration, I think, with respect to police record checks is an organization's third-party liability insurer. I don't know how the insurance companies are responding to this in terms of that kind of a requirement, but I don't think it should be left out, at least that consideration, because obviously, if you've done to borrow from Shaminda, your due diligence according to your insurance policy and obviously in any conditions that attach to it, then you shouldn't be denied coverage in case there's a claim or indeed a loss. But I think that third-party liability should be considered.
Could I add something to this? This is Lion Julian. What happened over the last little while is each in the institution that you will volunteer for, they have their own policy for police check. Years ago, the police would do it in a blanket across the board, but they really don't do that unless there is a big need for it. So the individual facilities, they have got their own document, and they get you to go to their document and they do the processing. So basically that's been happening at most of the long-term and the other facilities that we've been dealing with. I agree. Now with the COVID, it's a little bit different. But the 6 month, if someone has a clearance and it's within 6 months to a year, it's still valid. But the individual establishment, like our last speaker spoke about the insurance policy that covers this, it depends on the establishment that you will be volunteering for. Thank you.
Thanks, Lion Julian. So I think there's something that we're speaking to here, and I think Shaminda touched on it as far as how the police sees it as there isn't just one line of defense. The record check is one step you can take to keep volunteers and clients safe, but it's not the only step that's required. And in the absence or in the with fewer police record checks being able to take place during COVID-19 and perhaps more or different types of risks associated with the situation, it's on organizations now for us to think, what could we do to come up with other ways of ensuring there's a safety in place. I spoke to Cal and Meals on Wheels today, and while they're not able to get a full verification of the driver's license and police record check from the police, they've been asking for their volunteers to complete a declaration form. So that's a step that they're still taking in order to keep their volunteers safe. So they keep the clients and volunteers safe. So that's something that we have to kind of think about as individual organizations, but across the system. Can we take some additional steps? And typically what happens in a situation like COVID-19, like even before when your organization was deciding whether or not to close its doors or stay open and so forth, we went through a process where everybody was kind of waiting for each other. Everybody was watching somebody else and saying, well, they closed, so now we'll close. Or they haven't closed, so we won't close, or things like that are taking place. So we tend to be kind of reactionary, where what we kind of need is to have a decision made where yes, we could collaborate, or we have some things in common. Maybe not every organization, but some organizations that have things in common might say, well, why don't we all take this step and create this type of standard so that we could implement something that's going to enhance the training, or at your volunteer orientation, we use this verbiage or we use this language to make sure that the organization or the volunteers know their rights and responsibilities. Let's make sure all of these organizations have implemented that piece to their volunteer orientation. So I think that's really what we're driving at in this conversation, is how can we collectively work together to establish some new standards and not necessarily only rely on police record checks as our means of safety considerations. Shaminda, you can add to that, or anyone else?
No, Sean, you covered everything. It's just that I shared the OPP website statement saying that they do provide the service, but as on a needs base. Like that's a simplified statement that they have made. So if callers can go to the chat box, you will see that, because there was one commenting that they are unable to get the police records checks done.
Great. And so this training that we did yesterday with the volunteer orientation, we'll do other sessions of the community responder volunteer orientation. But if other organizations are interested in getting their volunteers to go through the orientation, maybe as a refresher, maybe they probably have had some training of some kind at some stage, or as a fail-safe to say, yeah, there's be a basic level of understanding from the volunteers. That could be an opportunity where, as a volunteer center, if you wish, we could play a role as far as providing, a little bit more training to the community at large for things that will be quite shared in common. Of course, your individual organization's training would have to still be there in place, but I think these are things that organizations could think about, and we could come up with ways that we create a more system-wide training. We're just about out of time. Are there any other questions or comments or thoughts on how we might go about enhancing training?
Sean, hi, it's Derek from the city of Mississauga again. Can you guys still hear me? Because I always have trouble. Yeah, thanks. Just to your points with, I think what might be helpful, and I'm not involved with this, you guys are more than me, and I don't sit at this table, but some of you in this conversation may, and I get the names wrong, but the community responders meeting that you guys attend right now, or what's the name of that called, Sean?
Community response table.
The community response table, for example, you guys at Volunteer NBC are great for volunteering, advocating for volunteer organizations, and there's other organizations I know that sit on that, like Region Appeal, I'm sure, and other ones. But if you could bring up some of these points at those meetings and keep those going after the fact, I think for some of the things like criminal record searches, if everyone's meeting about it, not just us, but at the higher level, and because of this, like going forward in the future, if everyone maybe agreed that in these kind of situations, could we agree upon, if there's an emergency situation like this, that instead of, say, for example, our 1 month policy is you would accept 6 months or whatever, and then if everyone was on the same page, we might be able to put some of those regulations in place, as well as your training. For example, it's like, here's the kind of the training we offer. Would everyone be willing to show this training? And then it's done and it's consistent and everybody has the same thing to avoid the duplication. I don't know how workable it is, but I think you guys have already started to take the right steps with these meetings. And I think if you could continue to bring those things forward, it's a great voice for other organizations, but it also keeps the people that need to know in the loop, and it makes them think about it. I don't know if that makes sense, if I'm explaining that quite right, but I think that would work well.
That's great, Derek, and thanks. Absolutely, we're happy to go and advocate, at tables that this is a way we could move forward, and the buy-in from frontline organizations is really important for us to say, yeah, okay, this is, we would want to initiate it, but they would be bought into the process. They would also want to see that happen. So if several organizations, even in the chat, if you say, yeah, that's something we would love to see, then we would be able to say, yes, we have specific organizations, this organization and that organization, this organization are definitely ready to kind of go forward with this if we push it. So that will definitely help us. We're out of time. I do want to let everybody know that when we send out the recording, we'll also be sending out all the links for every tool and every function that we talked about. And certainly the recording of the community responder volunteer orientation. So please watch for that. And if you can find the time, please even observe the orientation and you'll have more ideas and send them to us. Get in touch with Shaminda. And this is an ongoing conversation. All the conversations we're organizing are not stopping at the 1 hour mark. They're meant to continue. So any last things before we dismiss, Marina?
No, be okay, but I just wanted to say in the chat, Karine has already committed to bring this the piece about the police record checkup at the community response table tomorrow.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you everyone for your participation today, and we look forward to keeping this going.
A last clap before we go.
Good call, Julian.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank
Until
you.
next time.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Most welcome.
You can end the recording now, by the way. Or I can do that.